on a security spot, you're going to work in the command post. It's like, forgot your gun, really? I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah. And I'm not even an agent that has to worry about that, but we're all like rolling our eyes. It's like, come on, guys. Of course, now everybody wants to look like SWAT, so it's a little
Right,
different.
yeah, they get all kitted up.
Yeah, yeah, they come in, it's like, wow, sappy plates, nice. That's going to make the public feel good, It's like, yeah. But yeah, back when I first got to the White House in communications, one of the most sobering things that ever happened to me was I decommissioned the limo, the presidential limo that Kennedy and Connally were in.
Wow.
And the only thing that was missing was the back seat. And there I am. And it's a weird government thing that, right, inside that limo was government equipment. The limo was going to go to, I forget if it was the Ford Museum or which museum it was going to go to, but had to take the government equipment out. It's like out of date, out of use, doesn't operate, but you still got to remove it. And
Right.
so I crawled around in that limo and took out all the wiring and had to put the floorboards back together and stuff. So I basically deconstructed some of it to get the equipment out, the cabling and different things like that. This is back in the day when we just like almost like a car 54,
Oh,
where
car 54, where are you? Yeah.
we had a Motorola, we had what we called a head like this, and it had lights and a volume switch, and that's where your microphone that you held in your hand and talked on plugged
Yeah.
into, right? And then in the back was at that time we used Motorola for our walkie-talkies, and then we used RCA radios in the back, and it was in the trunk. And so I had to take all that out. But that was a very sobering day, um,
Yeah.
being around that. And then it wasn't too much longer after that when I joined the Secret Service, that I was sent down. It's a Route 50 is one of the highways that goes in and out of DC on the Virginia side. And I
Hmm.
was assigned to drive down to a horse farm and take the alarm system out that one of my predecessors had put in at a horse farm where Jackie and the president had gone just for a little relief, like 25 miles, 30 miles outside of DC for a weekend before going to Dallas. So,
Wow.
yeah, I was connected in a couple different ways. And it's interesting how much longer that was, right? Because in that would have been 78, right? That much longer.
Okay.
So it's like, oh, some probably number cruncher in Treasury said, oh, we still have equipment over here. You got to go get it. It's like, I mean, it was old stuff, but anyway.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, I can imagine it. People don't realize that that car stayed in use. It was refurbished immediately after the assassination. Everything was taken out of it, and then put back in by the Ford company. But they figured, oh well, that was a crime scene that had to be preserved. It wasn't preserved, and it was, as you just said, that limousine was put back into service for an awfully long time after the assassination as well.
Yeah, it's funny at that time, right? We did not have the Suburban. We did not have the ubiquitous Cadillac, Escalade, Suburban, black Expedition, whatever. Our armored follow-up cars were like other Lincoln Continentals that were armored, things like that. And we drove around in station wagons. So
Wow. Yeah.
it's like being one of the Griswolds, except we had Uzis and shotguns in our station wagons.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah,
So,
you had the fun things.
the fun things, yeah. Yeah, literally. So yeah, after it was interesting when I first got to the Secret Service, it's like they were still using a Model 357, a 357 Magnum revolver was the weapon for the Secret Service.
Yep.
Little stubby thing, lots of firepower, short barrel. You could hide it fairly well, but the thing had a hammer on it that would tear your clothes up.
Right.
Man,
I
it
read
not
that.
only, and then if you're leaning over, it's digging into your side and your kidney, you're thinking you're under attack from your own pistol. Um, yeah, and it was a little bit later, like after Kennedy, of course, but that the Secret Service adopted the Uzi. And once again, it wasn't about knockdown power or things like that. It was about how many rounds can I get out to put the bad guy's head down so I can leave the area,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that that, that yeah,
That was the reason for it.
exactly, exactly. And then, like we talked about, eventually this counter sniper team show up or brought to bear, and then we had lots of very good shooters come out of Vietnam and things like that. I went to a course, a white feather course, Carlos Hathcock course uh,
Hmm.
on sniping and stuff like that. So
Wow.
Secret Service grew out of that, right? It's funny because Secret Service had the protection mission. Most people don't know at the time, the only other thing the Secret Service did was funny money. We did counterfeit money.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. That was that's the inspiration for the Golden character in my novella is Abraham Bolden, who was a real person, but I fictionalize his exploits in the novella for dramatic purposes. But he was one of the leading counterfeit experts in the Secret Service at the time, and he had just happened to work protection because Kennedy requested him. But you're right; a lot of people forget that the Secret Service had that other purpose, which was securing the nation's currency.
Yeah, yeah. During my time, we had a Scooby-Doo van with shag carpet in it that I had installed little Niagara recorders in and put microphones in. And it was little reel to reel. The reels were only, maybe 2.5, 3 inches across, but had two reel to reel recorders in there, tape recorders with microphones in this shaggy van, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it had mag wheels. I was hoping, but that's where we would do that. That's where we do the other mission, which was, buy funny money, try and, work with bad guys that way. So, um, oftentimes, uh, uh, getting back to that advanced team idea, we would bring in agents from other places, and they would have never served on a protective detail, right?
Right.
Protective details are pretty small. Um, your life sort of goes away. You're traveling all the time. You're on a shift. There's different shifts, team shifts. When you're on the vice president of the protective detail, or at the time we were still doing Kissinger. Uh,
Oh,
DS had not really formed up to protect uh, Kissinger yet. So this is a little bit like before Fred Burton and all of DS stood up at the Department of State.
okay.
So we were busy, and then as part of technical services division, I could be assigned to a presidential visit one day. 2 weeks later, I'm going with Mondale up to the Blue Ridge to go fishing, or you
Yeah.
know, like with Ford, it's like I learned how to ski in Vail because it was like, don't run, I told them I didn't know how to ski, but they're like, well, take a class and don't run over the president. So, yeah. So, um,
The
but
parameters were very clear.
that's right. The second parameter, take a class if you need to, but don't run over the president. But yeah, so it's once again, you can imagine having to do an advance like on for a president who's spending time at a ski resort, right? So you
Right.
can take over a house, set up a command post. The president's in another house. You got agents around the house. You bring in uniform division, Secret Service uniform division, like you see around a White House. You bring in the dogs and or other EOD teams and things like that.
Mm.
So pretty complex. It was between the Secret Service and White House Communications Agency. If the president went somewhere, there were two refurbished special mission C-141s that were full of gear and the limousines. Uh,
Right.
back then, the only helicopters we really had were the the big 53s. So if they needed other helicopters, they would fly in special mission Hueys and then eventually Blackhawks and things like that on other aircraft.
Right.
If the president, if the advance team determines the president needs to hop around. So that idea, like you have in the novella, that he's going to fly in, then he's going to motorcade through. That's exactly, what happens 90% of the time. They land. Usually, if there's an Air Force base close by, they'll land there because there's that built-in protection, and then
Right.
motorcade out. But presidents have landed at most major airports before.
Right. Yeah, and he was also in trouble too because they were worried about him being reelected the next year. So a lot of the people on his staff were looking to get him photographed in adoring crowds, which wasn't tough to do, and that's why they selected the motorcade route that they did in Chicago because it maximized the amount of people that would be around him on a slow turn in Chicago, which was fascinating to me.
Oh yeah. When I read that, the hair stood up on my arms. I'm like, no, 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 we can't do that. It's
Right.
like I have this old muscle memory about even looking and thinking about those sites. When I see the president's going to be somewhere, I'm sort of, it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then I start diving into, oh, what's that going to take,
Right.
And yeah, that's the kind of mindset you need, is that not paranoia, but you are plans within plans, looking to, do everything possible that you can. Oftentimes, some things that even seem absurd, well, that can't be of much value. If it's any value, the presidential protective detail will employ the capability to protect the president. So.
Right, exactly right. Yeah, and it's that part of the story has always fascinated me, and how the similarities in that parade route and that entire day were very much similar to what was soon to happen in Dallas later that month in November. And there's also another plot in Miami, which was eerily similar too. So it's just really, I found it fascinating when I started doing my own research into it, not just listening to what other people have done, being inspired by it, but also doing research of my own. It was, you see these tactical decisions that they made, like about the motorcade route. You just say, God, what were they thinking?
Well, that's it. The campaign team, the presidential advisors, they all have a different end state they want, and it's the Secret Service job to adjust. And what you brought up is a very good point, because one of the best things you can do to protect yourself or a protectee is you never go the same route the same, right? Right. We read
Right,
about this all the time. Let's get some proof of lifestyle, right? Let's figure out what this person does every morning, how they get up, get their coffee, where they go for a bagel, right? We track those kind of things.
right.
And so what you've just said is that there was somebody in the administration who was just sort of blueprinted this idea of, oh, I could do this and get this photo shoot at 3 different Chicago, Dallas, Miami.
Yeah,
And so if that's the case, what they had unwittingly done is given anybody who wanted to look at planning an assault kind of ideas, like, okay, well, they're going to do the same kind of thing. And if we can identify where that grab fest, handshaking might occur and stepping out of the